His office took up the entire top floor of the Stellar Core building. On his desk was a small wooden plaque that read, "I don't buy businesses. I save them." At 52, Taeho had built his empire by finding failing companies and making them profitable again. His phone rang. "Mr. Kim, your 2 o'clock is here," his assistant said. "Send them in," Taeho replied, straightening his expensive suit. 3 people walked in, an older man with worried eyes, a younger man carrying a metal case, and a woman with a tablet. "Mr. Lee, thank you for coming," Taeho said, shaking the older man's hand. "This must be your team." "Yes, this is Juno, our lead engineer, and Sunmi, our financial officer," Mr. Lee said. "We brought the prototype as you asked." Juno placed the metal case on Taeho's desk and opened it. Inside was a sleek, curved object that looked like a modern boomerang. "The Returner X9000, Juno said with pride. "The world's first smart boomerang. It has AI guidance systems, self-correcting flight paths, and a 99.8% return rate." Taeho picked up the boomerang, feeling its weight. "Impressive. And you say your company, Flyback Tech, is the only one with this technology?" "Yes," Mr. Lee nodded. "But we're running out of money. We can't afford to start production." Sunmi stepped forward. "Our patents alone are worth millions, but banks won't lend to us anymore." Taeho smiled. This was exactly the kind of opportunity he loved. A good product with no competition, and a desperate seller. "Let's see it work," Taeho said. They moved to the company's private garden on the roof. Juno explained how to hold the boomerang, then Taeho threw it. The X9000 flew in a perfect arc, then returned smoothly to his hand. "Amazing," Taeho said, genuinely impressed. "Let's try again." On the 5th throw, something strange happened. The boomerang wobbled in the air, veered sharply to the left, then suddenly dropped to the ground. Juno rushed to pick it up. "Sorry, that sometimes happens. We're still fixing some bugs in the guidance system." "Bugs?" Taeho asked. "Nothing serious," Juno said quickly. "We just need more development time." Back in his office, Taeho looked at the financial report Sunmi had provided. Flyback Tech was 3 months away from bankruptcy. Their technology was brilliant, but they had spent too much money developing it. "I'll make you an offer," Taeho said finally. "Stellar Core will buy Flyback Tech for 30% of what you're asking." Mr. Lee looked shocked. "That's not enough to pay our debts." "It's enough to avoid bankruptcy," Taeho replied calmly. "You keep your jobs, and I'll invest in fixing the product." After tense negotiations, they agreed on 40%. Contracts were signed, and Flyback Tech became part of the Stellar Core family. The next day, Taeho called his legal team. "Create a new company," he instructed. "Call it Kim Recreational Solutions. Make it separate from Stellar Core but owned by me personally." His lawyer looked confused. "May I ask why, sir?" "The boomerang product has some issues," Taeho explained. "I want to limit our liability while we fix them." 2 weeks later, Taeho met with Juno and his engineering team. They showed him detailed reports about the X9000's problems. "The guidance system fails about 2% of the time," Juno explained. "When it fails, the boomerang becomes unpredictable. It could go anywhere." "How long to fix it?" Taeho asked. 6 months, minimum, Juno replied. "We need to redesign part of the system." Taeho frowned. His marketing team had already planned a major launch in 2 months. Waiting would cost millions. "Start working on the fix," he said, "but we're launching on schedule." "But sir," Juno protested, "it's not safe." "We'll include warnings in the manual," Taeho said dismissively. "The 2% failure rate is acceptable." Juno looked troubled but nodded. That evening, Taeho showed the prototype to his friend Director Park, who headed Stellar Core's insurance division. "Impressive," Park said after watching a demonstration. "But I hear there are some technical issues?" "Minor ones," Taeho said. "Nothing serious." Still, you should get special liability insurance, Park suggested. Just in case. Taeho smiled. Already done. The product will be sold by Kim Recreational Solutions, not StellarCore. Smart, Park nodded. Though I hope you never need that protection. I never do, Taeho replied confidently. This boomerang will make us rich. As the sun set over the city, Taeho stood on his balcony, tossing the X9000 gently in his hand. He was already planning the product launch party on his private island. It would be spectacular, a perfect way to showcase his newest acquisition. The morning sun sparkled on the clear blue waters surrounding Taeho's private island. A white tent stood on the beach, filled with 50 of the richest investors in the country. They sipped expensive drinks and chatted while waiting for the main event. Today, Kim Taeho would show them the Returner X9000, the world's first smart boomerang. Taeho arrived by helicopter, wearing a white suit that gleamed in the sunlight. He walked confidently to the tent, shaking hands and smiling at his guests. Behind him, his assistant carried a silver case. Welcome, friends, Taeho said when everyone had gathered. Today you'll see something that will change the future of recreational technology. He opened the silver case to reveal the X9000. Several guests leaned forward to get a better look. This is not just a toy, Taeho continued. This is a marvel of modern engineering. It has artificial intelligence that guides its flight. It adjusts for wind. And most importantly, it always comes back to you. One investor raised his hand. What makes this better than a regular boomerang? Taeho smiled. Words can't explain. I need to show you. He led the group to an open area of the beach. Several cameras were set up to record the demonstration for marketing purposes. Juno, the lead engineer, stood nervously at the edge of the crowd. He had warned Taeho again that morning about the guidance system problems, but his boss had ignored him. Stand back, please, Taeho said to the crowd. Give me room. He held up the X9000, making sure everyone could see it. Then he took a deep breath and threw it with perfect form. The boomerang shot forward, its edges glinting in the sunlight. It curved gracefully to the right, then began its return arc. The crowd applauded as the boomerang landed smoothly in Taeho's hand. Impressive, said Director Park, who stood near the front. But many boomerangs can do that. True, Taeho nodded. But watch this. He threw the X9000 again, this time at a steeper angle. The boomerang soared high into the sky, almost disappearing in the sun's glare. It hung in the air for several seconds, then descended in a perfect spiral, returning to Taeho's outstretched hand. The crowd clapped louder. A few investors nodded to each other, clearly impressed. For my final demonstration, Taeho announced, I'll show you the X9000's true intelligence. He gestured to two assistants, who ran to position themselves on either side of him, about 20 meters apart. The X9000 can identify its owner, Taeho explained. Even with multiple people in the area, it will always return to the person who threw it. He threw the boomerang hard. It shot forward, beginning its wide arc. The crowd watched in anticipation as it reached the apex of its flight. Suddenly, the X9000 wobbled. Its smooth path became erratic. Instead of turning back toward Taeho, it veered sharply to the left. Juno stepped forward, his face pale. Something's wrong with the guidance system, he said quietly to Taeho's assistant. The boomerang rocketed toward the crowd of investors. People ducked and shouted in alarm. It missed the first row by centimeters, then hit a champagne glass, sending it shattering to the ground. Get down, someone yelled. The X9000 ricocheted off a tent pole and spun wildly across the gathering. It clipped a woman's handbag, knocked over a camera tripod, and narrowly missed Director Park's head. Taeho stood frozen, watching in horror as his perfect demonstration turned into chaos. Then, as if guided by some cruel fate, the boomerang made a final turn and headed straight for him. Mr. Kim, look out! Juno shouted. Taeho raised his hands too late. The X9000 struck him directly in the face with a sickening crack. Blood sprayed from his nose as he fell backward onto the sand. For a moment, everyone stood in shocked silence. Then people rushed to help. Director Park reached Taeho first, kneeling beside him. "Call a doctor," Park shouted, pressing a napkin to Taeho's bleeding face. Taeho lay stunned on the sand, his white suit now stained red. His nose was clearly broken, and a deep cut ran across his cheek. In the confusion, no one noticed one of the investors still filming with her phone. By evening, the video of the Boomerang backstab had gone viral across social media. 3 hours later, Taeho sat in the island's medical center, his face bandaged. The doctor had just told him his nose was broken in 2 places and he would need surgery. Director Park entered the room, looking concerned. "The investors have all left," he said. "And the video is everywhere online." Taeho touched his bandaged face gingerly. "This is a disaster." "Maybe not," Park said, sitting down. "I've been thinking. You own both companies, right? The one that made the Boomerang and the one that sells it?" "Yes," Taeho replied, wincing in pain. "Why?" A slow smile spread across Park's face. "I have an idea that might turn this accident into the best thing that ever happened to you." In the quiet corridors of a downtown law office, Sarah Martinez sat hunched over stacks of legal documents, her fingers tracing the intricate details of a case that would change everything. The lawsuit against Titan Pharmaceuticals was no ordinary legal battle, it was a carefully orchestrated strategy born from years of silence, suffering, and meticulous planning. 3 months earlier, Sarah had been just another junior associate at Thompson & Reed law firm. Now, she was the key architect of a legal strategy that could potentially bring down one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. Her client, Emily Rodriguez, represented hundreds of victims who had been harmed by a dangerous medication that Titan had knowingly continued to produce. The evidence was damning. Internal emails revealed that Titan's executives were aware of severe side effects months before the drug's widespread distribution. These documents, painstakingly collected through months of secret investigations and strategic document requests, told a story of corporate greed that made Sarah's blood boil. Her approach was calculated. Instead of a massive class action lawsuit that might get buried in legal complexities, Sarah chose a different path. She identified 12 primary plaintiffs whose stories were both compelling and scientifically supported. Each victim had medical records, expert testimonies, and personal narratives that would resonate with a jury. The legal team worked tirelessly. Late nights became the norm, with Sarah and her colleagues mapping out every possible defense Titan might construct. They anticipated the pharmaceutical giant's moves like a chess grandmaster, preparing counterarguments for each potential strategy. One critical breakthrough came from Dr. Michael Chen, a former Titan research scientist who decided to become a whistleblower. His testimony would be explosive, revealing internal discussions that proved the company knew about the medication's risks long before it hit the market. Sarah's strategy wasn't just about winning money. She wanted systemic change. The lawsuit was designed to not only compensate victims but also force Titan to implement stricter safety protocols and admit their wrongdoing publicly. The preparation was intense. Depositions were carefully choreographed, with each question calculated to reveal the truth. Witnesses were coached, but not rehearsed. Their genuine pain and experiences would speak louder than any prepared statement. As the court date approached, tension mounted. Titan's legal team was formidable, with dozens of lawyers ready to fight every single claim. They had unlimited resources and a history of crushing smaller legal challenges. But Sarah wasn't intimidated. On the morning of the first hearing, Sarah stood in the courtroom wearing a crisp navy suit, her demeanor calm but determined. She knew this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a fight for justice. The 12 primary plaintiffs sat behind her, their faces a mixture of hope and anxiety. The opening statements would be crucial. Sarah had spent weeks crafting her argument, balancing technical medical information with human emotion. She wanted the jury to understand not just the scientific failures but the human cost of corporate negligence. As she began to speak, the courtroom fell silent. Each word was carefully chosen, each pause deliberate. She wasn't just presenting a case, she was telling a story of real people whose lives had been forever changed by a company that valued profits over human lives. The pharmaceutical company's lawyers shifted uncomfortably. They knew this wasn't going to be an easy fight. Sarah had prepared for every possible scenario, and her preparation was about to show. What made her strategy unique was its comprehensive approach. It wasn't just about winning a lawsuit, it was about creating a precedent that would make other pharmaceutical companies think twice before prioritizing profit over patient safety. Both sides had presented their initial arguments, but everyone knew the real battle was just beginning. Sarah left the courthouse that evening, not celebrating, but already preparing for the next day's challenges. Her phone buzzed with messages of support from the victims and her team. But Sarah knew that true victory would only come through persistent, strategic legal work. This was just the beginning of a fight that could change an entire industry. The lawsuit against Titan Pharmaceuticals was more than a legal case. It was a statement, a clear message that corporate misconduct would no longer be tolerated, and that justice could be achieved through careful, strategic legal action. The courtroom buzzed with nervous energy as the trial against Titan Pharmaceuticals began. Sarah Martinez stood confidently, her eyes scanning the jury with a calm determination that masked the months of preparation behind this moment. Judge Elizabeth Harris, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and a reputation for fairness, sat at the bench. Her mere presence seemed to command respect from everyone in the courtroom. The first week of the trial would set the tone for everything that followed. Emily Rodriguez, the lead plaintiff, sat in the front row. Her hands trembled slightly, but her gaze remained fixed and strong. She represented hundreds of people who had suffered because of a drug that promised healing but delivered pain instead. Sarah's opening statement was a carefully crafted narrative. She spoke about real people, not just medical statistics. She shared stories of patients who had lost their health, their jobs, and their hopes because of Titan's careless decisions. Each word was like a carefully placed arrow, targeting the hearts and minds of the jury. The pharmaceutical company's legal team was led by Richard Thompson, a veteran lawyer known for his aggressive defense strategies. He wore an expensive suit and carried an air of confidence that suggested he had won countless impossible cases. But Sarah wasn't intimidated. Dr. Michael Chen took the stand as the first key witness. His testimony was explosive. As a former Titan research scientist, he revealed internal communications that showed the company knew about dangerous side effects months before the drug's release. His hands shook slightly as he spoke, but his voice remained clear and determined. Titan's lawyers tried to discredit Dr. Chen, attacking his credibility and professional reputation. They suggested he was a disgruntled employee seeking revenge. But Sarah had prepared for this. She had documentation, email trails, and additional witnesses that supported every single claim Chen made. The medical experts brought in by Sarah were exceptional. Each one carefully explained the scientific evidence, breaking down complex medical information into language the jury could understand. They showed how the drug had caused specific, measurable harm to patients. Dramatic moments punctuated the trial. One day, a surprise witness appeared, a former Titan executive who could no longer live with the guilt of what the company had done. His testimony added another layer of credibility to Sarah's case. The pharmaceutical company's defense was predictable. They claimed the drug's side effects were rare, that the benefits outweighed the risks. They presented their own experts, tried to muddy the waters with complex medical jargon. But Sarah remained focused. Judge Harris managed the courtroom with a firm hand. She didn't allow unnecessary drama or emotional manipulation. Her primary concern was the truth, and she made sure both sides had a fair chance to present their arguments. Emily Rodriguez's personal testimony was perhaps the most powerful moment of the trial. She spoke about her own experience, the pain, the lost years, the medical bills that had destroyed her family's financial stability. Her words were simple but devastating. The media coverage grew intense. News outlets followed every detail of the trial, painting it as a David versus Goliath battle. People across the country watched, hoping that justice might finally be served against a powerful pharmaceutical company. Titan's lawyers became increasingly desperate as the trial progressed. Their strategies of intimidation and legal maneuvering seemed to be falling apart. Sarah had anticipated every move, prepared for every possible argument. Expert witnesses continued to provide compelling testimony. They used medical records, scientific studies, and personal accounts to build a comprehensive picture of the drug's devastating impact. Each presentation was like another nail in Titan's coffin. The jury listened carefully. They were ordinary people, a teacher, a truck driver, a retired nurse, among others. But they understood the human cost of corporate negligence. Their faces showed growing anger towards Titan's apparent disregard for human life. As the trial entered its final stages, the tension was unbearable. Sarah's closing argument was a masterpiece of legal storytelling. She connected the scientific evidence with human emotion, showing how Titan's decisions had real, painful consequences for real people. Richard Thompson's final defense seemed weak and unconvincing. His arguments sounded like desperate attempts to protect corporate interests rather than genuine concern for patient safety. The jury's deliberation would determine everything. Hours passed. The courtroom waited, holding its collective breath. Sarah remained calm, knowing that she had done everything possible to present a clear, compelling case. Justice was about to be served. The jury had been deliberating for 3 days. Tension filled the courtroom like thick smoke, with everyone waiting for the final verdict that could change everything. Sarah Martinez sat quietly, her fingers clasped tightly together. Emily Rodriguez was beside her, her breathing shallow and nervous. The weight of hundreds of victims' hopes rested on this moment. When the jury finally entered, the silence was so complete that even a whisper would have seemed loud. The jury foreman, a middle-aged man with glasses, held a single sheet of paper that represented months of legal battle and years of suffering. "We, the jury, find Titan Pharmaceuticals guilty of systematic corporate negligence," he read. The words hung in the air, powerful and transformative. Emily burst into tears. Not tears of sadness, but of relief. Years of pain, medical treatments, and financial struggles were finally acknowledged. The courtroom erupted in a mix of applause and emotional responses. The verdict came with a massive financial settlement. Titan would pay $450 million in compensation to the victims. But more importantly, they were required to recall the dangerous medication and implement strict new safety protocols. Judge Harris hammered her gavel, officially ending the legal proceedings. Sarah watched as Titan's legal team looked defeated, their expensive suits suddenly seeming less impressive. Dr. Michael Chen, the whistleblower, approached Sarah after the trial. "You did it," he said, his voice filled with a mixture of relief and vindication. His courage in coming forward had been crucial to the case's success. The media coverage was immediate and extensive. News channels ran stories about the landmark case, presenting it as a significant victory for patient rights. Sarah became an overnight legal hero, symbolizing hope for those who had been ignored by large corporations. Titan Pharmaceuticals stock prices dropped dramatically. Shareholders were shocked, and the company's reputation was severely damaged. The message was clear: corporations could no longer hide behind legal tricks and financial power. In the weeks following the trial, Sarah received hundreds of letters from people across the country. Patients who had suffered similar experiences saw her as a beacon of hope. She had shown that individual citizens could fight back against powerful institutions. The legal victory wasn't just about money. It was about accountability. It was about forcing a massive corporation to admit its mistakes and take responsibility for the harm it had caused. Emily Rodriguez became an advocate for patient rights. She started a foundation to help other victims navigate complex medical and legal challenges. Her transformation from a silent victim to a powerful advocate was inspiring. Sarah's law firm celebrated the victory, but she remained humble. She knew this was just one battle in a larger war against corporate negligence. There would be more fights, more challenges to face. The pharmaceutical industry watched the case closely. Internal discussions began about improving safety protocols and being more transparent about potential drug risks. Sarah's case had created a ripple effect that would impact medical practices nationwide. Dr. Chen, who had risked his entire career by becoming a whistleblower, found new purpose. He began consulting with medical research teams, helping to develop stronger ethical guidelines for drug development and testing. Titan Pharmaceuticals was forced to undergo extensive external audits. Their internal research processes were completely restructured. The company that had once prioritized profits over people was now under intense scrutiny. The financial settlement was distributed carefully. Each victim received compensation based on their specific medical challenges. It wasn't just a blanket payment, but a carefully calculated approach to addressing individual suffering. Sarah continued her work, taking on other cases that seemed impossible. She had proven that with careful preparation, strategic thinking, and unwavering commitment, justice was possible. Years later, law students would study this case as an example of how individual determination could challenge corporate power. Sarah's approach became a blueprint for similar legal battles across different industries. The trial was more than a legal proceeding. It was a statement about human rights, corporate responsibility, and the power of speaking truth to power. As Sarah left the courthouse that final day, she felt a sense of peace. Not a celebration, but a quiet understanding that justice, though slow, could ultimately prevail. The story of Titan Pharmaceuticals would become a warning to other corporations. The days of unchecked power were over. Accountability was no longer optional, it was mandatory.